This is Women's Leadership Success, episode number 116. Let's face it, we are in a tsunami of change, especially the last 2 years. Things will never be the same in business, life, or in the career choices you make. Some of you may be experiencing this chaos as more difficult, holding you back. Maybe you're unsure how to navigate. But out of chaos can come great opportunities for you if you know how to be what my special guest today calls a transformational leader. Your ability to survive and thrive in this new world of change is what #1 New York Times best-selling and award-winning author Faisal Hoque and I are going to share with you today. Faisal is a futurist, serial entrepreneur, and consultant to many of the top companies and governments in the world. This deep, thought-provoking, and truly beneficial interview will show you how to think about this new changing reality and make a real impact as a transformational leader, one who focuses on people and long-term innovations and solutions. This is your key to converting chaos into success, no matter if you want to be a better leader, advance your career, or help to change the world. Be sure to listen for my special invitation for high-potential executive women to help you have more impact, influence, and double your income later in the show. And at the end of the show, a special Women's Leadership Success listeners discount from Faisal on his new Transformational Leadership video course, with 100% of the proceeds going to support cures for cancer.
Welcome to Women's Leadership Podcast, showing you how to influence people, improve your performance, and advance your career. Brought to you by women's leadership and career expert Sabrina Braham and womensleadershipsuccess.com. Here's your chance to meet women trendsetters leading the way to success, accomplishment, and balance in business and life. No matter if you're a manager, CEO, or entrepreneur, join Sabrina for coaching and no-nonsense advice to improve your career and bottom line.
Good day. This is womensleadershipsuccess.com. I'm thrilled today to have Faisal Hoque with me. Faisal is, I have to read this because there's so much. He was voted top 100 most influential people in technology. He's a regular contributor to Fast Company and the Harvard Review. Faisal is an accomplished entrepreneur, noted thought leader, technology innovator, advisor to CEOs and the federal government, and a best-selling author. His book, Everything Connects, will be re-released this year by Fast Company. I had the great pleasure of interviewing Faisal on this book, July 2014. It was one of my all-time favorite books and interviews. It's WLS number 59. I recommend that you listen to it again. It's called Everything Connects, a Women's Career Guide to Personal Success. His newest Wall Street Journal best-selling book, Lift, Fostering the Leader in You Amid Revolutionary Global Change, explores the intersection of transformational leadership, systemic thinking, and experiential learning, all required to survive and thrive. This tsunami of changes and disruption is caused by several things, which I'll ask Faisal about in a minute. So Faisal, I'm so thrilled to have you here today. And I was going to start with a question, but you mentioned that you almost didn't write the book, and I would really like for you to share what you said about that.
Thank you. Thanks for that very warm and generous introduction. So one correction, I do not write for Harvard Business Review. I do write for Business Insider, nevertheless. So we all gone through all sorts of changes, some of the changes are together as a society because of pandemic and other things. Personally, each one of us I'm sure, gone through tremendous amount of changes professionally and personally. Mm-hmm. In my case, right before, right at the beginning of pandemic, my teenage son goes to, started his freshman year, and then he comes home because of pandemic. Turns out he has a rare blood cancer. Fortunately, there are treatment available, and he's doing fine. And but right at that beginning of that situation, which was almost now 15 months ago, I signed the contract to do the book, but I right after I found out, it took out the air out of me, and I almost didn't do the book. But I ended up doing it partly because I thought this was a very important message. It's an optimistic message that is very much needed given all the things that are going on in the world. And the fact is that I kind of wrote it his generation as in my mind, because they're just coming of age, right? So they're kind of lived through this. Like my son didn't have his graduation because of pandemic. Then he goes to college campus, comes home. We're seeing massive geopolitical changes. We're seeing climate changes, crazy misinformation driving both sides of the political realm. So a lot of these changes, and I kind of wrote it him as one of the audience, and what us as adults should be doing to help that generation. But I also wanted to take the proceed of the book, and I wasn't, it was not anticipated that it will do so well, and became a #1 Wall Street Journal bestseller. So that happened, and I kind of we created a whole bunch of training and educational program around it, and I've kind of pledged all this for cancer research. So all the proceeds from the book and my training courses goes to cancer research.
Thank you for doing that. That is such a wonderful thing you're doing for all of us, because there's no one on the planet that isn't touched by cancer as well as the pandemic. It's such a serious problem. So I think it really is important for young people to understand this. And your book goes into such depth on all of the different challenges we're facing right now. And it connects to how important it is for us to be transformational leaders. So could you just say a little more about the disruptions? And I also would love you to give a definition of that word. I remember a long time ago, I studied Gurdjieff, and Gurdjieff said, in life, you go down a path and then something happens, you hit a shock point, and you can't keep on that path. You've got to go on a different path. Yeah. And is that what you mean by disruption?
It's divergent, right? So, in the sense that you're on a path and it totally knocks you off your path, and you have to rethink and reinvent and redo whatever that you have been doing. And it happens on individual level. It happens on a societal level. So it happens in organization. Disruption is like par for living, I guess, right? So the way that I love connecting kind of disjointed things together, like I did in Everything Connects, looking at mindfulness and creativity and innovation. So on Lift was driven by these separate change of events, but somehow they connect and they have tremendous impact as a whole. So, and I kind of looked at it from these four major change point of view. So one is obviously pandemic. We all lived through it, living through it. And it's completely changed the way we work, socialize, learn, et cetera, right?
Mm-hmm.
But along the way, at the same time, what we have also seen, you and I are doing this Zoom call. The technological advancement that has kind of rapidly, accelerated during that time out of necessity, right? So whether that's on communication, whether that's medical field, and I lived through this personally because of my son, but also because of, I have a aging mother who is in nursing home, so we have to do a lot of telehealth type of a thing. So technological, and then the business models, all driven by massive technological changes, and we kind of call that fourth industrial revolution because that technological advancement, it's actually convergence of a lot of different type of technology. It's information technology, manufacturing technology, nanotechnology, biomedical technology. It's all coming in one place to change the way we live. Period. Mm-hmm. Not just work so that's another thing. Obviously, we've lived through misinformation. Does pandemic exist? Doesn't it exist? Is it man-made? Is it? We've seen all kind of gamut of misinformation, and it's driven by vested or ill-will parties. It doesn't matter which side of the belief system you're in, whether you're left or right. It doesn't matter. Disinformation and misinformation completely changed the social makeup, and it created a humongous amount of distrust and almost that civility we had is gone, right? So we don't almost want to learn what the facts are, right? So that's that. And the last thing, which we're middle of summer, flights are not going in Paris, public transportation cannot go in London. Mm-hmm. I was in Germany last week. It was nice, but this week is horrendous. It's like climate has completely changed, right? Crops are dying. We have water crisis. Some cases in my native land, Bangladesh, it had massive flood a couple of months ago. This is crazy things, right? So it's creating this massive migration because people can live where they used to live. So if you look at those four things, that's kind of how I looked at massive change, and they're all kind of interconnected. Mm-hmm. That's drove, the background. These are the major changes, and those are major disruption. So now what are you going to do? Can you do the things the way you were doing? No, you can't. You can't do. It cannot be the same old, same old. Whether you're a government leader, whether you're my son's age, whether you're an entrepreneur, whether you're an author, whatever it is, you can't do the same thing.
Faisal, how do you think people know that or notice it? And if how would I know that this isn't going to work anymore? I need to do something totally different. What are my clues? In the book, you talk about getting 3 questions to get unstuck. Are those good things to ask?
Yeah, you can ask, like, what is it not working? What what is it that I should be doing differently? Why am I doing? There's a lot of question about why, right? Mm-hmm. Because we gone through these really, in many ways, kind of like a, for good or bad, sort of a spiritual questionnaire about why am I doing what am I doing? Why do I have to go to work? Why do I have to work 7 days? Why can't I see my parents? So what? We got pandemic. These are a lot of whys, right? So why am I not sending my child to school? They're getting socially disjointed. It's having psychological impact. A lot of whys, right? So my point is that if by now, if you haven't felt that something has completely changed, then maybe you're living under a rock because the world has changed. We always talk about change, but the change, the kind of change we have gone through last few years, we've seen that change society as a whole not just as an individual. So, I mean, we're feeling the heat, we're feeling the cold, we're feeling the flooding. I mean, these are changes that very vivid. You cannot feel this change. So if that's the case, you have to do things differently. I mean, I know, I'm sure in your neighborhood, many restaurants has closed, but then many also thrived during pandemic, right? Because some thrived because they repackaged their food and they were very adapt to delivery models that just cropped up. And some just died because people were not going and visiting physically in the restaurant, and they reinvent, right? So those are very simple examples of why you need to change. It could be economic driver, it could be psychological driver, whatever.
So how do you do that? Before we started, you said this is an optimistic book. So what kind of actions can we take that are going to help us to be a transformational leader and also impact the bigger picture?
Sure. But first, let me tell you why it's optimistic. So out of disruption, there's always tons of opportunities. So let's just take that example of restaurant that I gave you, right? So there are restaurants that kind of thrived middle of pandemic, and they couldn't keep up with the business because there was such high demand, because they reinvented and reconnected with all these stay-home people, and they all needed food. So they came up with a new way of packaging, a new way of creating food, and also the delivery model. So there is the opportunity, right? Learning, you talk about learning. I think there hasn't been a better time to learn because we had actually had a lot of extra time, but we also learned from experiential impact, meaning the way we shop, meaning we, looking at streaming services that allows us to learn from docuseries, all sorts of things, right? So that's why, and reinventing ourselves. Like, for example, if it wasn't pandemic and if I wasn't doing a lot of the work at home, I don't think I could actually sit there and pull together a book within, 9 months. Previous books took like 2 years or so. So that's why it's optimistic. So now you say, okay, well, how do you change? I mean, you almost have, I go to, you know me very, very, but by now that I kind of start with, you as a human being, and how do you get in touch with yourself, and then how you connect yourself with the outside world. So that connection comes from empathy, right? You have to be very empathetic and practice empathy on a conscious level that shows you what is going on around the world and what is going on within your realm, right? And that allows you to understand how do you get opportunistic about change. So when you understand somebody going through a pain point, I'll put it in a commercial term. The restaurants that succeeded, I'm just using that as a simple, understandable example. They were empathetic to the fact that it's an opportunity, but they were also very empathetic that, hey, I'm going to deliver the food, but then they will have to warm it up, and who warms it up, blah, blah, blah. So that's really putting yourself in somebody else's shoe, how they're going to live and work and eat and all that stuff. So that empathy is the fundamental pillar of transformational leadership, right? So because once you have empathy, then you can say, okay, how do I prepare myself to interact with other by being an influencer, by being a supporter, and by being a enabler, so that other people can succeed. As a result, I succeed, right? So that empathetic, practice, conscious practice on a daily basis, which is very difficult, by the way, because we're all, human beings was designed to self-preservation. So we instantly first think about what's going on with me. But once you practice that, you actually succeed, and you're actually able to contribute a lot faster. So that eye on the other allows you to do much more than you think you can do just focusing on yourself, because it gives you a different kind of a purpose. Going back to the book, I think one of the reasons I was able to do it, and despite my no planning or my any kind of goals of that this has to do well commercially, because as you know, I don't, I'm not the traditional author speaker that makes a living. Unfortunately, I've got other things, but it happened because of my personal circumstances, and looking at the fact that I wanted to do something where I can generate revenue for giving to somebody else. I think that played a big role, how fast I was able to do it, and whatever little traction that I'm having with the book.
So I think I totally agree. I think empathy is one of our most important things to learn. Do you have a suggestion of how someone can be more empathic?
Yeah, look, it's like, for example, it's, by the way, it's a conscious practice, just like mindfulness is. And there's a deep connection between mindfulness and empathy. Every time you have an interaction with somebody, right? Let's say and we all get agitated, we lose patience and whatnot. And let's say and we've all gone through it. Like, you're trying to have a work conversation and you're seeing that person is not engaged. There's some stuff going on in their lives, right? And then, so it's easy to get frustrated with that person. I said, what's the matter with you? Why haven't you done this? Blah, blah, blah. Excuse me. But it's a conscious practice saying, to stop yourself and look at that other person and try to understand what is going on with that person. That is a practice of empathy, right? And you can make it bigger and bigger, and then you look at it as an ecosystem. So that restaurant, an example, that was a collective, social pattern or ecosystem that was suffering from the common problem, right? But it starts with one-on-one, right? You really have to look at somebody else before you look at yourself. That's where it kind of starts.
I want to back you. That's great. Makes a lot of sense. And I'm thinking I was coaching another coach on how to ask questions the other day, and he was having trouble understanding why this person was having a problem. And when you're saying this, I'm going, oh wow, he wasn't putting himself in their shoes. He was busy trying to figure out what's the right question so he looks like a good coach. Yeah. But I want to back you up to mindfulness. What's the difference between mindfulness and meditating? And I just said to somebody the other day, I know these people, they meditate all the time. They are so negative. They open their mouth and they've got some negative thing to say. What's the difference between meditating, I'm a meditator, and being mindful?
So, by the way, you mentioned that we're releasing Everything Connects. Fast Company is releasing, Everything Connects. It's actually the ebook version just came out, and the hardcover will come out shortly. Uh-huh. Same with the audiobook, and it's a second edition, so we expanded the original version, and there's a new section, and one of the chapter in the next, in that section is expansion of mindfulness.
Great.
So it goes into meditation versus mindfulness. The real definition of mindfulness is being one with whatever you're doing. So if you actually look at history of mind, the meditation, it comes from a lot of Eastern philosophy and the Zen Buddhist and whatnot. And if you study them, one of the things they do is cleaning and cooking, right? And that is a form of meditation, because the idea is that when you're cooking, you're cooking. When you're sweeping, you're sweeping. There's no other thought should come in your head. So and that is also, by the way, a conscious practice. So right now, when you and I are talking, in my mind, at least I try, it's not always easy, just like meditation. All I want to think about is this conversation. Nothing else matters. The fact that there's a thunderstorm, literally a thunderstorm happening outside of my window, or let's say what I have to do later in the day, those thoughts should not come in my mind. And I have to be one with this conversation. That's what mindfulness is really about. It's giving utmost importance to that particular moment is what mindfulness is. You cannot practice empathy, conscious empathy, if you are not mindful of the person that is in front of you, right? So shutting your mind from all other thing aside from present is what mindfulness is about. So
that's beautiful. I remember talking to this woman was super angry at her boss, and she had to go have a conversation with him. And she's saying, well, what can I talk about? I'm so angry. And I said, well, what if you're just intensely curious about him and the conversation, which is another way of saying mindful or be present. Yeah.
And look, I mean, the runners or joggers will tell you that when they jog, they forget about everything else. The musicians will tell you that when they play music, you forget about everything. They forget about everything else. Or when you're listening to music, you forget about something, that you forget about everything else. Or when you read, you forget about everything and you're just focusing on the book. Those are all examples of being mindful, right? And those are all also example of meditation. So, for example, I love to cook. So that's my form of meditation and mindfulness, even though I do meditate, whenever I can, early in the morning, literally sitting outside, but it's not about meditation. It's about, being consciously present at the moment, and you can't possibly be empathetic if you're not present at the moment.
Mm-hmm. And it really extends one's life.
For
and
sure.
There's no way to be a transformational leader unless you're mindful and you have empathy.
For sure. I mean, how do you connect with people if you're not mindful and empathetic? I mean, there's more to transformational aside from being mindful and empathetic, but those are the first ingredient that allows you're in touch. Right? How do you be in touch? Well, if you're not in touch, you can't change anything, right? So you have to be
right. It's like building blocks. There's no way to get to the other building blocks until you do that. And I want to hear more about the transformational leader, but I wonder if you could, you said there was 5 questions that you can ask for empathy. This is a test. Can you remember what they are?
I don't actually remember what I wrote because, by the way, that piece of 5 questions, I wrote that many years ago, not about the book. I think 4 or 5 years ago, I wrote an article because I was struggling with the same thing where I would look at some of my managers and they would not just connect with the people they're trying to lead or manage. And it came from there, right? So I wrote that. But, essentially, the questions are related to it is why and what and how, right? So it's like you're really asking, why are you doing what you're doing? So you have to actually first ask that yourself. So, for example, if I'm asking somebody, hey, listen, we're going to do a reorg, as an example, right? So first you have to explain to yourself, why do you want to reorg? Is it because efficiency? Is something broken? Is something not working? Whatever it is. And then once you have those answers, then you say, okay, well, I need to restructure these people this way because of this reasoning, but also they have this particular expertise or they have this and that. And by the way, the world has changed, all that other stuff. So you got to start with what is the reasoning? What do you want to do something? What's your purpose, right? So that's first. Second is, okay, so you got the why, and then you're saying, okay, so what will be the impact? If you did this, what is the outcome that you want to achieve from that? Is it that you're trying to change the world? Is it just you're trying to grow revenue? Is it because that you want your employees to be happy? You want to make money for more for your investor? Whatever it is, what would be the impact of that why? And then you have to figure. Then you have to say, okay, how do you do that? How do you do that, right? So, how do you make the why to what? What is the methods to making it happen, right? So you need the mechanism. So when you're intently, trying to be transformational, your empathy comes from that why, but then rest of it goes from, what the other two things I talked about in the book is the systemic thinking and systemic execution, which is the how, and then, the experiential learning, which is really about how do we learn on a constant basis, because adaptation doesn't come without learning, right? So we know we have to change because we were forced to learn that world had changed, right? So that is experiential learning. You could read about 20 books, it's not going to resonate till you feel that experience, right? So you and I can talk about leadership all day long, but if we don't practice it in our own life, then we're just talking about it, right? So you have to learn from doing it and whatnot. And systemic thinking, by the way, if you want to scale anything, for example, you can't do that without having a system in place. So for what I mean by that, let's say you want to write a book, as an example, right? You kind of have to figure out. You have to have a system in place. How you're going to gather your information and how you're going to formulate that in an understandable manner. Then you have to figure out, how you're going to float it into chapter. So that's just writing process. Then you have to figure out, okay, how do I get it out to the world? How does that become a repeatable process? How does people find me? How does people, once they find you, what do they do with it, right? So these are all like systemic thinking that has to happen if you really want to have any kind of change in place that are repeatable, right? One-time change is not transformational change, because transformation is about a journey. It's not like you go from one point A to point B and you're done, because just when you say you're done, something else will happen, right? So you have to have a system in place that allows you to do that constant repeatable process of changing.
Let me ask you a very personal, real question. Your willingness to address this question and your answer could mean the difference between doubling or more your income in the next year. Do you consider yourself a high-potential female executive who seeks more recognition, income, and influence? Someone who aspires to the C-suite or higher? Or maybe you seek a whole new opportunity, either internally or externally with a new company. But somehow you feel stuck, or maybe you're not recognized for your hard work and are getting passed over for promotion. Or you just need a new strategy to help you advance your potential and your income. The demand for high potential female executives that earn top salaries and profit-sharing opportunities has never been higher. But if you don't know how to stand out from the crowd, attract your champions, navigate organizational politics, or lack confidence to ask for what you want, you may be left behind or miss out on some great opportunities. If you can relate to any of these core executive development questions or challenges that may be holding you back, I've got some good news for you. For many years, I've been an executive coach and management consultant. One of the most rewarding aspects for me as a champion of women's leadership is helping women like you have more influence, impact, and income in business and life. I've had phenomenal success helping women advance their careers and radically increase their income, especially in STEM and tech, when previously they had been stuck or sidelined. That is why I'm inviting you to apply for my executive coaching package for high potential women to help you stand out from the crowd, turbocharge your career, and radically increase your income. Warning, this turbocharge your career is not for everyone. It's not an overnight transformation. But if you are a focused, high potential woman leader, willing to invest in yourself and follow my proven strategies to advance your leadership and career, you'll be amazed at what we can accomplish together. I invite you to book a free discovery coaching session with me right away, because I can only take a limited number of people a year for this special package. So I invite you to reach out to me via my contact page on womensleadershipsuccess.com so we can connect and see if we're a good match. Thanks for listening, and now back to the show. You also mentioned design thinking. Tell me how that fits in.
Yeah, so design thinking is I actually, even though I didn't use the word design, we just went through that process.
It's the same thing.
Same thing, in the sense that, okay, well, I want to write a book. Okay, who is it for? How are they going to use it? What are they going to learn from it? How am I going to portray my content? So those are like the abstract design. Physical design would be, okay, what does it look like? Is it friendly enough? Can people access it, right? So those are all part and parcel of design thinking. By the way, one of the very big principles of design thinking is empathy, because you cannot think from that point of view unless you think about your audience, is being empathetic to the audience in order to design something that has value, right? So the design thinking comes from, very basic principle of design thinking is actually empathy, but it's designing for somebody else, not for yourself, and then making it accessible so that it becomes of something of a value. Book, audio, tape, a course, a software, which is my primary business. It doesn't matter. It's all the same.
What I'm finding with a lot of leaders is there are not really good courses or training programs. Certainly, you could go to the Center for Creative Leadership or Harvard or Yale or Cornell and take a course. But for the majority of people, they don't really have access to really good mentors and teachers, which is one of the reasons I have this program, because I want people to learn. They could take your book and use that as a way to learn. And also, you said there's a course.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, so I developed this 5-part course. It's designed as a documentary style, docu-series type of a course. And there is obviously exercises and reference material, et cetera, et cetera. But I apply design thinking in that because, one of the things you meant, the reason there are not too many good courses or you don't get value out of it is because, you have to make the learning process experiential, right? I mean, the many ways, the way the courses has been delivered now is still very old style. In the sense that it's very academic. It's you take it so that you can pass a course. You take a test and you pass a course, you get a certificate, et cetera, et cetera. Those days are over, right? So you have to learn. You want to learn because you want to learn, not because you want to get a certificate or a grade or whatever, right? So if you look at the new generation, you look at my son's generation, they're learning more from YouTube videos, and they're learning from playing something or going and picking up some devices, or they're going at a restaurant. Like most of us think about. People who are a little older, they had a very hard time just scanning the QRP code to pull up the menu, right? And I compare that to my, the younger generation. The 19 years old had no problem with it. But that's the experiential learning. But guess what? We too got used to, or you take your phone and you scan the QR code and that's how you get the menu, right? Mm-hmm. It's a behavioral change. So the leadership training and the courses or the practices also has to be very experiential. People love to hear stories. You don't remember the methods, but you remember the stories. So one of the things I tried to do, and it was a kind of an experiment, because, I'm a product developer, I like to do experimentation. If you look at those courses that I just talked about around Lyft, it is like watching movie. And it's like, it talks about, this is how the world has changed. Here's a tsunami. So there's a narrator and there's videos and real footage and whatnot. And it's not like, okay, somebody saying, okay, you go through these 5 slides and then you test your skill by taking this short test and then you go to the next one. No, those days are over. You don't learn from that. You remember movies, right? So, and you remember experiences. You remember stories. So the storytelling and experiential learning process and the emotion that gets evoked from seeing something and listening something and talking to other people are the next generation learning process. Mm-hmm. So if you want to be a mentor or a coach or whatever, which I'm not, they have to teach from their own experience. They can't just or produce material that are from actual doing it and connecting with them by those kind of a real scenario, right? So I don't write anything from. I do a lot of research because I want to back up my whatever I'm saying. But most of my stuff comes from me being in the field and doing and sometimes succeeding and many times failing, and then try to make it better point of view and being very observant of what other people does or doesn't do.
Yeah, and I agree with what you're saying, and I think also as you're reading or watching the videos that you've done or reading your book, it's also mindfully noticing what level you're at in your leadership, and then being empathic. Okay, I made a mistake. What do I need to do to correct that or get rid of that behavior? Or that's great, and now what do I want to do next? In a way, we have to become our own coach and guide through a lot of this in order to really move to the top levels.
Yeah, look, there's no substitute for doing. You have to do what you're preaching, right? So you can't, it's like, listen, we have to work hard, but I'm punching out at 3:00. That's not a very good reflection of leader. Or we have to cut costs, but I'm happy to take a private jet. That's not a very good reflection of leadership, right? So often our leaders of all level, and I've kind of seen all gamuts by now, they say one thing, do completely different things. That's not a good motivator, right? So if you want to be influencer, the command control is over. People have a lot more opportunities now. I'm sure you have heard this great, dissatisfaction and not wanting to work at all and a resignation and whatnot, the great resignation, a lot of conversation about great resignation, but we're headed towards recession, so that may change. But people in general have a lot more options. So you really, as a leader, your job is we talk about transformational leader and influential leader. You really have to be an influencer and an inspirational in chief versus the command control. And you have to practice what you preach. You have to walk the talk. You cannot not do that and be transformational of any kind.
I totally agree. I'm going to back up. In your book, you say we should all be futurists.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things I admired in your book was the great ways you put together lots of different information and came up with some different ways of thinking about things that I had never thought of. It took me sometimes I sat there for an hour just pondering some idea you'd put forth and trying to decide where that fit into my reality. So it was for me, it was fun. But how do I become a futurist?
Well, I mean, so I give you my own example, and then because for each is different, because we're all each one of us are just like our unique DNAs. We have unique journeys, right? You can't replicate somebody else's journey, but you can adopt the philosophy and you can adopt the techniques. I mean, as a cook, I say this all the time. It's a philosophy. It's not the recipe. It's the technique. It's not knowing you put 2 spoons of that and 3 spoons of this, right? So I look at life from that point of view, and so I mean, you were just talking about developing that coursework, and I, I mean, people will tell, people will judge whether I've been successful creating an innovative way of delivering content or not. But the way I looked at it, who's my future? Well, my children are my future. So how are they learning, right? So when so those are the questions. So I said, okay, well, if I wanted to teach whatever I'm learning to my son, if I give that book, he's not going to read more than 3 pages. I know that for a fact. Mm-hmm. But if I create a docu-style, engaging, video-driven learning vehicle, he will do that because I see him doing that all day long, right? So there is my futurist in me looking at that generation and say, okay, well, if that is the generation I'm trying to attract, that I have to change the way I'm thinking of how am I producing content, as an example, right? So it's a that kind of a thing. But in order to be a futurist, you also have to develop basic techniques that you cannot substitute, which are very fundamental. Like, for example, it's like whether you're a writer, musician, chef, concert pianist, everybody will tell you is the ritualistic practice that gives you the techniques, and then you can improvise. If you don't have those techniques, you can't improvise. Being futurist is about looking at what's going on the planet and then improvising your skill set for that changed world. But if you don't have that basic skills, your core competency, how are you going to do that? But I was able to deliver my content because I'm a content delivery expert, because I know my domain, but I'm just using a different medium to deliver that content in a different way. And I tapped into other people who are expert in packaging content, not necessarily in the similar domain and not necessarily in similar field, but so asking for help and collaborating with people where you don't have the skill also allows you to bring you those different perspectives, right? So there's a combination of, if you remember, we talked about last time, being consciously omnivorous, right? So meaning you have to eat a lot of food if you wanted to develop your own set of dishes, or and what that means is that if you haven't tasted different flavor, how can you create your own flavor, right? Yeah. So being futurist means, to be a futurist, you have to experience a whole lot of things. Going back to Da Vinci, I wrote that article right after Everything Connects because I was thinking about, because we used Da Vinci as a in the backdrop, and that his ability to connect the nature and how Bart flies, and therefore we should come up with a flying machine that has wings like the Bart flies, and I'm going to study the pattern of the flight of a bird. Those are very different things and then connecting those dots to create something different. Well, if you want to have vision of the future, you kind of have to study all the things that are going around you and ask those questions, and then you can create the future and be a futurist.
Wow. I have never in my whole life heard anybody explain that, and it makes so much sense.
Thank you.
And I actually have kind of a little tiny example of that. I used to want to take classes in flower arranging. And, if I could just arrange flowers. Well, I live on an acre of land. I have right now, there's 40 dahlia bushes that are blooming, loads of roses. I have literally thousands of flowers. And the reality is if you go out every day and you pick flowers and you put them in a vase, at some point you get pretty damn good at it.
Yeah,
so
sure. It's ritualistic practice.
Yeah, just the practice. All of a sudden it's like, whoa, that looks pretty good, but it's just doing it over and over again.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you know Jack Papan. I mean, he says all the time, just cook. Don't look at the recipe book. Just cook. Just keep cooking, and you'll find your own rhythm. I mean, it's or Chef Morimoto says the same thing. So just cook. Because it's that's and then I mean, if you remember Ernest Hemingway, he used to say all the time that writing is one of his biggest challenges. The only way he can do it is because he would sit every day 3-4 hours and just write. It doesn't matter what comes out of his mind. He would just write, right? So that is the ritualistic practice.
Right. And so many people want to skip that part.
You can't good at it if you don't practice.
You can't do it. I was just talking to a man he's a head of a company and he wants to be a coach. And he's telling me, I had this problem in my coaching. I was coaching, so I had a problem. I said, that's because you're not very skilled at it. And he's so confident he could hear that without feeling bad about himself. It takes practice. You got to keep doing it. Oh, this has been so wonderful. We're just about done. Is there any, can you give the people listening, especially the women, some action they can go take that will help us to change the world and make it a better place? That's mine.
Look, I mean, I will. I'll give. This is not a woman or man thing.
Okay.
I'll try to give two. First thing is that philosophically know that life is not fair, and we will always have challenges, and it's you just have to go through the journey and be optimistic, and not all will work out exactly the way you thought, but it can be very interesting, and that is the thrill of it, right? So you have to be able to think that way and plow through it. And so and why that matters is because you can't lift anyone if you don't know how to lift yourself, right? So one of the key messages of the entire book is that lift yourself to lift others, right? So if you're a man and woman, young, old, live here, live there, it doesn't matter, that applies anywhere, right? So that's one point. Second point is that this notion of transformational, I mean, you don't have to change the world to be transformational. You can do like one little thing and you can be transformational, right? So for example, we have all these organizations. This is one of my other favorite charity aside from recent, not recent, I've always been into the cancer research, but it just hit home now more than ever. But, another one is food related. And you see that Chef Jose Andres' World Kitchen. And look at, UN cannot do it, government cannot do it. He has managed to do this, right? So that's a great study of leadership, because the way he has done it is that it's very fundamental empathetical need that everybody's hungry. We have to feed them. That's number one. But we have to put a system where no matter where, any kind of crisis happens, I got to be able to mobilize the local people so that they can go and help the people, local crisis, local help, right? And I have to be able to learn repeatedly and improve upon that process. That's one of my other charity, right? So if you look at that, that is a great example of what I just talked about in terms of empathetic, leadership combined with systemic execution and experiential learning, plowing back to the whole system so that you can improve it and make monumental impact. But each of those people that are serving locally, they are transforming that particular moment in time, and that is enough, right? So you don't have to go and change the world. The goal of transformational leadership doesn't have to be changing the world, just changing yourself and your surroundings. And then if we all did that, then we'll be a better place.
Oh, that's beautiful. What a wonderful place to end. Thank you so much for coming on the show and talking to us today.
My pleasure. It's my honor. Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. Hey, keep listening. If you like this show and want to learn more on how to be a transformational leader, I have a special offer for you in just another minute. Thanks for following me on LinkedIn for more leadership tips. And I really appreciate you sharing, liking, and giving me a review in iTunes or your favorite podcast platform. Remember, if you consider yourself a current or future high-potential female executive that wants to have influence, impact, and radically increase your income, I invite you to reach out to me on my contact page, womensleadershipsuccess.com, so we can connect. I sincerely hope my discussion with Faisal on how to be a transformational female leader in times of enormous change and disruption has gotten you thinking. It certainly has changed my thinking. I was very touched when Faisal shared his commitment to donate all the proceeds from his new 5-part online class based on his book to cancer research. I've started this course and it looks really good. And to thank you for being one of my loyal listeners, Faisal is offering us a gift of 50% off your order. This is $149 savings. To sign up for Faisal's class, just go to www.womensleadershipsuccess.com/lift. This URL will redirect you to his course information page, class overview videos, and the link to start the class. Use the coupon code WLS at checkout to save 50%. And for your information, I don't make anything from your purchase, just the good feeling knowing that you are supporting cancer cures, saving money, and getting support and information from a great thought leader and mentor like Faisal. Lastly, be sure to check out my action for traction for this episode in the show notes at womensleadershipsuccess.com. You will get 3 quick and easy tips based on this interview to help you truly be a transformational leader. Bye for now. See you soon.
Thank you for joining your host, Sabrina Braham, on another Women's Leadership Podcast. If you have questions or comments, you can email her at sabrina@sabrinabraham.com. Since 1989, Sabrina and her team have helped hundreds of women managers, business leaders, and entrepreneurs with valuable trainings, articles, books, and executive coaching. For additional tips, interviews, and free access to Great Leaders Today mini course, visit www.womensleadershipsuccess.com.